Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's event. We'll be starting shortly. We're just giving everybody a few moments here to join the broadcast before we kick off. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're just going to give everybody a minute here to join the live broadcast before we kick off. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Priya Agarwal, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Paper. For those of you that are not familiar with the company, Paper partners with K-12 schools throughout North America to give every student an equal opportunity to excel academically. Our educational support system provides learners with unlimited 24/7 academic support. Our specialized tutors deliver on-demand, one-to-one support in 4 languages across more than 200 academic subjects. So students always have access to the extra help that they need, exactly when, where, and how they need it. As part of the 4 Teachers by Teachers discussion series, we're really excited this evening to bring together educators from across the nation to share insights on how you can take charge of your tech-infused classrooms, since that seems to be something that is very prevalent this past year and more. Today's panel is really going to be sharing their firsthand experience on how they're leveraging technology and different strategies to address learner variability. For the conversation, we're really excited to bring together Alfonso Mendoza from Edinburg, Texas, Gordon Van Owen from New York City, Dr. Janet Ilko from San Diego, California, and Natalie Conway from Prineville, Oregon. The discussion is going to be moderated by Matt Rhoads, a teacher, education specialist, lecturer, and author. Before I hand over to Matt to kick off the session, a few logistics for us today. All of the attendees are in listen-only mode, but we do really want to encourage you to share your thoughts and participate in the conversation through the chat feature in Zoom, as so many of you are already doing. Starting with just telling us where you're dialing in from and what grades and subjects you teach. I think that'll help us orient the conversation a little bit better. And without further delay, please welcome Matt and the panelists for today. Matt, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is our 3rd and final panel of this series, and I'm just really excited about. We're going to be talking about how we can take a variety of different EdTech tools and strategy to address a very diverse set of learners. And our goal is to share how we are reaching all of our learners within our various classroom and school settings, inside and outside the classroom, in this online, blended, and traditional in-person options that we have today. Our goal is for you, the attendee, to walk away with knowing some of this, some best practice strategies that are research-based, relating to differentiating instruction and personalizing learning, and what are the best tools that we believe as a panel of experts that use the tools all the time that can help cater to individual learning needs. So the structure tonight, we're going to have about 5 questions, going to introduce the panel. They're going to give their context of where they're at in education. And then we're going to really jump into a conversation around these 5 questions. They're all related to our topic tonight, and I'm just so excited to get started. So let's begin with introducing the panel and providing their context in education. So let's go ahead with Alfonso. Give us your context in education and just give us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Matt, thank you for this invitation, and thank you to all the panelists that are here also that I get to connect with. My name is Alfonso Mendoza. I am an instructional technologist out of Texas. I work in a small school district in the southernmost tip of Texas, still 4 hours south of San Antonio, and I have been in education for a total of 15 years, 11 years in the classroom as a math and science teacher from grade levels from high school all the way down to elementary as well. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of y'all.
Thank you so much. Now let's go with Gordon.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gordon Van Owen. I'm a high school English teacher in New York City. I'm kind of reaching a point in my career where I'm having kind of an identity crisis, going from thinking I was the new teacher in the building to now being kind of the old man in the building. But I also spent 5 years teaching middle school literacy, and I'm just super excited to be here to kind of share my experience and talk a little bit about my school's experience using some ed tech.
Thank you, Gordon. We'll start with, we'll go to Janet now.
Hi, I'm Janet Ilko. I'm in San Diego, California. I've been teaching longer than perhaps some of you have been alive. It's about my 33rd year in education, somewhere between second grade through high school. I'm currently working at Health Sciences High here in City Heights, a charter school, grades 9 through 12. And my role currently is we will be going back to now what we're calling synchronous simultaneously taught teaching. Yeah, that starts Monday. So I'll be here talking about the strategies that we're using, and my doctoral work is in English learners. And my focus of my research is tech integration right now, and how does that support our students who are struggling academically, and also with a real focus on language development.
Thank you, Janet. We'll finish off with Natalie.
Hi, everybody. I am Natalie Conway. I physically here am in Prineville, Oregon, which is Central Oregon, high desert land. And I am in my 16th year teaching. I have been a special ed teacher since 2005. I did 2 years in third grade, started out as a what I call brick and mortar teacher, and then moved online. And so I've been teaching online for about 7 years now, doing special ed, kindergarten through high school. I currently teach at Frontier Charter Academy, which is a statewide public online charter here in Oregon. And then I'm also an instructional coach and podcast host at SYS Education. And so I love connecting with anybody who is into special ed and into doing well with that online. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone for being here. You have all such diverse backgrounds, and my background relates to special education at the secondary level. Been really focused on blended learning and EdTech integration since I began teaching, and really been focused on amplifying learning for students with special needs and English language learners. And within my new book, Navigating the Toggle Term, a guide for K-12 classroom and school leaders, which these panels are based from. There's a chapter or two relating to amplifying learning for English language learners, as well as students with special needs, where a lot of these questions were derived from. So I'm really excited to talk about this, as this is something that can really help all learners in your class. Doesn't matter if they're students with special needs or English language learners. These are strategies that can help all your students. So let's jump into the questions to get started. So the first question is, how do you use supports in your classroom to make learning accessible? So we'll start with Gordon, Janet, and then I'll finish us off for question number 1.
Thank you, Matt. So I will be probably the first to admit that the last year and a half or so of my teaching career has been dramatically different than any previous year. When our world was kind of turned upside down last March, my colleagues at the Urban Assembly School of Business and I had to think real quick about how to fully transition our entire instructional program online. And two major concerns kind of arose out of that transition. One was accessibility, and the other one was accountability. New York City is the largest school district in the country. It is super diverse, and we serve a wide range of diverse learners across the city. But not all of them had access to technology at home, much less access to the internet at home. And that was one of the initial issues that we had to address in the early days of the pandemic. Luckily, we were able to kind of mitigate a lot of that work, getting technology into our students' hands. Within, I'd say, a week and a half, 2 weeks, all of our students had access to either an iPad or a laptop at home. Those who didn't have access to internet, we were able to work with some of our partnership organizations to get them some free Wi-Fi hotspots. So I'd say by the end of March of last year, all of our students then had access to the internet, they had access to technology. But the other side of that accessibility piece was putting our curriculum online. Our school had been a G Suite school for a number of years prior to that. So all of our teachers had a lot of experience using, kind of Google Slides, some of the basics, Google Docs, things like that. But there's a shift that has to happen when you're doing things in person and then you go online, and you have to rethink how you're utilizing some of those tools. And at the same time, we had to think about, how do you put a classroom online and make it virtual? So we had about a week or so to learn Google Classrooms really quick. And not gonna lie, those first couple of weeks were a little touch and go, but once we got into our flow, that's when we started to think about, okay, how can we start to integrate certain levels of accountability for this so that our students are still learning, keeping up with the kind of learning expectations for the school year. We then started integrating some Google add-ons, things like Pear Deck. Some of our teachers were using other apps like Edpuzzle, Padlet, Delta Math, Desmos, Nearpod as a way to kind of juice up the lessons a little bit, but also to make sure that some of those, let's say, slideshows that we were posting had some accountability factored into it, where our students were being asked to respond to questions on the slides. We were using Padlet to have some virtual class discussions that could happen synchronously and asynchronously. And as time has gone on, my colleagues have gotten a bit more tech savvy with this. We've started using some video tools where we are able to integrate some sound into our lessons, actually creating YouTube channels and allowing students to then play those videos at whatever speed kind of meets their learning needs, which has been a huge boost for us as far as increasing student engagement in the work that we're doing, as well as making them feel more confident while they're working from home.
Awesome. I really like how you discussed the accessibility first, but then the accountability and engagement, because you can have the best tools in the world, but without being strategic in terms of your accountability and creating opportunities for student engagement with the tools that we have, then the tools themselves aren't very much worth a lot. So I think that Janet really can build on to this, given her background, and that she's in this simultaneous concurrent setting and just setting up for that.
So I agree. So accessibility and accountability, thank you, Gordon, is the key. And let's be clear, we all just jumped in the deep end, right? So whether you were techie or not, and I have to say, I'm self-admitted, I love it. And I'm the first person where my students teach me everything that they know. And we've all developed patience in the past year and a half. And I think some of the things that I've learned and that our site is really focused on now is we're going to be going into this new concept of what Fisher and Fry are calling Zoomies and Roomies. This idea that, we're going to have some kids on Zoom and some kids in the room at the same time and be facilitating. And what does that look like, right? So that's a new type of thing that'll be coming into the spring and perhaps into the fall. So I've spent a lot of time going back to the basics. And I think really what has been the biggest strength is what is happening that we really need to be teaching. And what I hope when we're heading back to the classroom is that what we've learned is we don't have to go back to the same, right? I'm sitting in the classroom right now, very different than the person who was in this classroom, over a year ago. And what we can use technology for and how we can continue this type of process is what I'm really excited to see. So we ask our students 3 questions, always. What am I learning today? Why am I learning this? And how will I know I've learned it, right? So those are the 3 things that are across the board, across classrooms, across our campus. And so those learnings are really the most important things. So what I've learned is it's not about the tool, it's about those 3 core questions. We spent a lot of time, like Gordon said, really honing in of what really needs to be taught, and then how will we know that they've learned it, and really helping our students self-identify that. One of the things that we use, for example, is Padlet. We start a class, and several teachers that I work with have a question which can either be referencing something they've learned or inspiring something for the lesson. It's a way to take attendance to keep us accountable. And for now, we're really keeping the idea of, okay, what are we going to do when we have kids in 2 different spots, right? So it's that new lens of looking. I also really want to refer to what Gordon talked about with LMS. What I learned was, I'm a writing project teacher, part of San Diego Area Writing Project, the National Writing Project. We tend to be very diverse thinkers. I'm that teacher that walks in the door and says, hey, where is it? I have her brand new book. Oh, The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman, right? And I'm like, oh, and then today she's on the cover of Vogue. And so let me add this and that. Well, that's a great in-person tool. That's a really not such a good idea when you're online. And so what I've learned is your LMS is critical, and how we organize that and access for our students, especially for our English learners, is critical. So coming up with having the same routines, putting things in the same places. We've had a lot of really good result with PlayPosit, and that idea that you put those videos into our LMS, students can be answering questions along the way. They can go back and revisit. For our language learners, I know we're going to get into that later, but really using Pear Deck and being able to teach that in class and then post it as an individualized way for students to go back and reflect has been great. And I think what we need to keep in mind is that how can these tools come back and be used with us to support our students, especially our language learners, when we come back to the classroom, right? That this isn't something that should just be, okay, put on a shelf. I'm now spending this last 9 weeks, what are we bringing with us? And then how can we use that successfully?
No, definitely. And I think that just making, for example, just videos and putting them onto your learning management system and developing those routines so students know where to access the videos, to access opportunities for them to see certain routines about maybe accessing a different type of assignment, using speech to text, just going from the basics all the way to explaining a project that you're working on, or incorporating an ed puzzle with clarifying questions relating to the task that you're working on, or using it as a way to front load content to students. And I like to do that within my learning management system, as well as I also like to record all of my classes on my Zoom, and I have my iPad going where I am doing my digital whiteboard, and it's being constantly recorded, as well as the Pear Deck. And I always put it onto my on-demand tab on my learning management system so that my students can always access the class regardless of whether they can be here, whether we've done it online or hybrid in person, or if they're unable to meet at that time. Ultimately, I just want to create the opportunity where they can always access the content and in an engaging way. So speaking of thinking about creating engaging instruction, we also have to think about personalizing it. And when instruction's personalized, it becomes more engaging to the student because it is something that they can attribute to and they can connect to, and that connection's huge. So for our second question tonight is, how do you use adaptive and personalized learning tools to differentiate instruction within classrooms that have students online and in person? So we'll start off with Janet, and then I'll finish off the question.
Okay, so one of the things that I focus on in my role here at Health Sciences is really supporting kids in differentiation and coaching our teachers and working with students myself on how to differentiate. And Carol Ann Tomlinson says, I'm going to read it because I think it summarizes differentiation well. She said, differentiation means tailoring instruction to meet individual needs, whether teachers differentiate content, process, products, or the learning environment. The use of ongoing assessment and flexible grouping makes a successful approach. And so whether you're digital or whether you're in person, That's really true. So when you're thinking about the content, what is being learned, right? The process of how students acquire that information, the products, how they demonstrate their understanding, and then the environment of where, when, and with whom students learn with, right? So personalized instruction, I think, has been enhanced in the digital environment, right? This is something that's a plus. So there's so much negativity out there right now, at least for the news media, right? That we've all fallen apart and no one's ever going to graduate. And oh my God, and let's just assess people to death in these last few weeks just to prove it, right? But we know that it's true. We know that they've learned a ton. And what I know is that I'm a much better differentiation teacher a year later into this because I was forced to really learn a lot of tech tools and sort out what was cute with bells and whistles and fun and really what sparked student engagement. So really content needs to remain the same, right? That's the critical thing when we're talking about differentiation. We're not talking about supplanting, we're talking about supplementing and supporting. So the first thing that we use a lot of something called Common Lit. It's free, one of the favorite things for teachers, right? Free. And we go in and we use that piece as our core content. They are able within Common Lit to have it read to, have it translated, have questions built in. Teachers can differentiate within that content, but every kid is getting that same core piece. And really, in dealing with our long-term English learners, I'm just passionate about the fact that students should not have differentiated or lowered leveled tech. You know, they shouldn't be put off doing something else. They should be integrated into the core. And there's so many tech tools that allow us to do that. Process, and that really gets into that. The leveled reading, there is a point for that, right? We need to have some leveled reading pieces. And there's so many ways to use Empowers or StudySync or iCivics in history that allows these hands-on and differentiated ways for students to get to that core content in history. Khan Academy became my very best friend because there were so many short little tiny videos that kids could use to supplement and to build that understanding. But I just keep wanting to tell people not to supplant. It doesn't mean you go off and you do this little Khan Academy. It's here's an option, here's another way. And that gets into the product. And that's what's so exciting about technology to me, is it's beyond the traditional sentence frame or we're having an essay, but we can use Jamboard, we can use Google Draw, we can use things that students already know how to use. One of my favorite, students use Screencastify and Loom to start doing presentations, things that are super easy for them to do, and providing that oral language development. I don't know about you, but I teach to a lot of blank screens. Half my day looks like the marketing paper right there on our screen right there. No idea what's happening behind there, but when they're able to Flipgrid and they put their cute little cover on their face, or they're able to talk in small groups or participate in a Jamboard, I can visually see that learning. And that is super powerful. And the products that they create are so much deeper than what they would do in the classroom. And then really, I think the last thing about environment, in the digital environment, I struggled. I'll be honest, I didn't Zoom for the first month we were on in this situation. I don't like looking at myself this much. I am over it, right? So y'all look cute. I am not as cute as that. So I had a really hard time, and Matt knows that, just Zooming. So I would call my kids and then we would work on the computer. And then I realized, okay, we really are here for the long haul. I got to figure this out, right? So what we've learned to use in that environment is to really structure Jamboard and Padlet while they're in breakout rooms, and use that to document the work. And then the kids can come back and re-access that. So in our finals this week, we've have teachers that have developed Jamboards all semester that students are allowed access to and are able to share that student work. So I just think there are so many ways to differentiate in a quality way. And we have learned so much about having student voice and intensity and ability to create their own, that I think is so much more important, where I feel like before in the classroom, the remediation of technology was much more off to the side, some kind of program that a student was being done to. And now I feel like there's so much more creativity.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just awesome how you can create a Padlet now or a Wakelet archive, and you can always have that going for your students, and they can always access that, whether it's notes or whether it's even student projects where they've created them and presented them to the class. It's always just locations for students to go back and see everything that they've created. And seen a really rise of digital portfolios. I love on Seesaw, for example, for my students, all the work that they've done over the course of the year, I can just take snapshots of it and put it into an IEP report, and you can see the progress over time. We worked on like linear lines earlier in the year, and now we're working on quadratics, and I can basically show pictures of all the different tasks and assignments they did over time, and you can see that development. And speaking of algebra and personalized tasks, so I like to do asynchronous playlists. So it could be different types of practice, doing different algebraic concepts in foundational math. And that includes like an Ed puzzle, and then working on an iReady or Prodigy, or you could use MobyMax, and you can give them differentiated lessons based on where they're at. Different students in my class are all at different learning levels and relating to math. So maybe students need to work on exponents one day. So I'll give several students an exponent lesson, or I'll give another student, they need some graphing support, so they'll get some graphing support lessons. So it's amazing that you can have these tools, especially if you want to have them do it during asynchronous or independent practice time, where you can really take areas where they can grow in, and you can optimize that growth for that student at that given time. I also like to individualize the feedback. So using a tool like Pear Deck, I can give them that verbal feedback and whole class feedback. But then if I have an instructional aide working with me or multiple instructional aides, I can have them comment as well on them. And then additionally, I use paper tutoring as my overarching support for my synchronous and asynchronous work. So students have been trained to take a picture of their work and put it online so the tutor can work with them at any time, 24/7, whether we are in class or we're outside of class. So my goal is to provide that overarching support and differentiation as much as possible in my classroom environment. So let's move on to our next question that involves instructional strategies and EdTech tools that can help our students, specifically our English language learners and students with special needs. We'll begin with Natalie, and then we'll have Janet finish us off with that question.
Hey, yeah, there is so much you can do. And one thing, having been online for as long as I have now, one thing to keep in mind when you're transitioning from in person to online or hybrid or whatever you're doing is that a lot of the pedagogical stuff you learned before still applies. It all still applies. And there is no like one tech tool that's going to do it for you or make it work for kids. It's still, the foundation is still the relationship, you and the kid, you and your students, and the foundation is still your approach and your demeanor and how you're engaging kids. So just all that said, I mean, a lot of the things you do already, like repeated readings. When I was getting my reading endorsement a year or two ago, I learned that you shouldn't have students do cold reads, which was something new. I had always had a kid do like a cold read and then repeated reading, but try to avoid that. That'll definitely help support more readers and more learners. Things like readers theater. I was just doing readers theater this week with some third graders, and I'm just screen sharing in Zoom, and they pick their part and we go through it. And it's an excellent opportunity for kids to practice their fluency and just practice speaking and listening. You can still do think, pair, share online. You can use breakout rooms if you're comfortable with that, or if you're a Zoom user. Another really cool idea is a silent discussion. So you can have students post on a shared Google Doc or a slide deck, whatever it might be, where a common space that they can all access digitally. And that can be where they prep before the actual oral discussion. So maybe you're into Socratic seminar or something if you're an upper grade teacher, and you can have students really plan out their thoughts ahead of time, comment on one another's before they actually have to kind of go live. And that's really, really helpful for a lot of students. And then Screencastify, which people have already mentioned, that's a super great tool for rehearsing, and you don't have to necessarily publish the first try, kind of similar with Flipgrid. And then other tools like books that have embedded visuals. If you're a Reading A to Z or a RAS Kids user, then they have a lot of sight word readers that have embedded visuals that go right along with the words, or Epic. I know not everything is free. I am so with you guys. Open ed resources are where it's at, but sometimes you do have to pay for a bit more in terms of features and that kind of thing. But just some other strategies, you can have students making anchor charts themselves, they can be making the vocab resources for one another. So they can be pairing highly visual cues and text that's meaningful to them. So think about maybe even Protocols, if you've heard of those. I'm new to those this year, but just Google Protocols and you'll find some great models like for Freyer model within slides and other ways that students can be writing and then using that to practice their speaking and listening skills. And then all the Google apps, sometimes keeping it simple is the best, and sticking to one tool or one suite of tools, I think, is really effective too.
I love everything you said. I mean, instructional strategies and teachers drive the use of tools which amplify learning. Something that I've been really passionate about and talking a lot about in my writing and on Twitter. And I know that Janet and I have talked a lot about that over the past year and a half. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she has to say now.
I think the biggest thing for us is really coming up. Well, my research has been about relevance and rigor for long-term English learners, right? And we all know that speaking, students in middle school and high school in particular love to speak until we're in class, right? Until we're going to have to speak in front of, or academic speaking. And so at my site, we do a lot of debate and group work and Socratic seminar and structured pieces in the classroom, right? And then all of a sudden we're home. And all of a sudden we're looking at blank screens. And I am petrified that our English learners are losing oral language development because they're just not speaking in class. Now, I don't know, y'all might have some really talkative groups. We do not in class. It's not something that has happened. And so I had to really get creative about how am I going to make this more engaging for kids, and how are we going to kind of force that academic discussion issue, right? And so we started using breakout rooms. We started using Flipgrid a lot. We allowed the students at first to have the cameras off, just because for my piece, it was really that oral practice of having them speak and answering, and then letting them put the filters and whatever else they want to do. They will selfie for 20 minutes, right? And get the perfect angle, but Flipgrid, they were just not having it. So I let that go. And I thought, what do I want? I want oral language development, right? I want my students speaking because we know writing is better. We know thinking is better. We know talking together is better. And so we came up with a couple of things that were really cool. One, I know that everybody knows TED Talks. We do a lot with that. TED Ed has a tremendous amount of students who speak from all ages. It's a great format. We allowed students to work in small groups to start building their oral language development that way. KQED does a lot here out in California. And I just yesterday was on an infographic, using infographics and having students create those and then talk about them. The New York Times for free for the rest of this school year, you can log in and get access to pictures. And we do a lot. I do writing with my EL students every Friday, and we use a lot of photos and data graphics from the New York Times in their student learning section, and have them read and discuss about that. In small group, we found that that's the best way. There's another thing, I'll put it in the chat. I don't know if you all know about Kumo Space, but Kumo Space is like taking this virtual space that we're in right now, and your little box gets to move. So you go into a classroom and you use your little arrow keys. I'm sure there's way more tech terms for what I'm saying. I know I'm on a tech show and I don't know what it is, but you take your little arrow keys and you can move yourself around, and it's a literally virtual classroom for up to 30 people. And so we've been doing a lot of our meetings in that, where you can walk around to the table, to the swimming pool, to here, to there. And after they play around in it for a while, students we're finding are really opening up, because it feels more like a classroom, right? It feels more like that place. And it's something I'm going to be experimenting with when I have my roomies and zoomies, to actually put those students who are in the classroom in that virtual space and let them walk around. It's going to be chaos and crazy, but I'll put it in the chat. It's a really opening place. And I guess for me, my last part of this is oral language development. We are losing ground. I feel like in this last year, it hasn't been as much as it could have been in my experience with our students participating in class. So it's something that I'm going to continue to focus on. But I really feel like for those teachers who are afraid of breakout rooms, and you've got middle and high school, put them in the breakout rooms, because that's where the talking happens. That's where the learning happens. And then giving students supports, some sentence frames to use more of that piece, put them in a TED Talk type of format, and then to make them very short, quick, pieces and then leave those things up there for them, because I think that's just critical for our kids.
No, definitely. I love that new space where you can use that virtual classroom space, and I'm looking forward to hearing what happens with your Roomies and Zoomies. So let's move forward to the next question, which is, how do you leverage academic support tools to personalize learning? So Alfonso's going to go, and then Natalie is going to finish this question off for us. So go ahead, Alfonso.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to come with a different perspective. Being an instructional tech for the district is just leveraging, is like Natalie mentioned earlier, is just really keeping it simple. One of the things that helped us to be successful in our district is, I know that we're talking a lot about the students and the students and the students, but we went as far as including our parents in that learning community. And oftentimes many districts may forget that piece, that the parents are part of our learning community. So what we did is we leveraged our tools and saying, okay, parents, this is the platform that we're going to be using. And from March 13th on, when it was my task to train the whole district on all of the Google tools and everything, I created videos in English and Spanish for our community. And then we started doing live sessions. And what we do now is we meet once a month with parents, both English and Spanish speaking parents, and we always keep them abreast of all of the technology that we are using. We walk them through the platforms. We walk them through Google Classroom. We walk them and show them how to use Kami. We show them how to find just simple information on each school's website. So, like I said, one of the things is just really informing, giving that information out. And also for our teachers as well, is just really keeping it simple. Like Natalie said, and I agree. I mean, everything was here. It's like, she read my mind, because this is something that is very important. What our district did is we only picked 4 platforms that we're using straight across the board. Now, I know that other teachers will, experiment, and they're on Twitter, and, they'll try new things, but we'll leave that for those that are really thriving online. But for those teachers that were just really just scared, we just said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to use Kami. We're going to use Screencastify. We're going to do Edpuzzle. And then, of course, we've got Google Classroom. That's what we're going to be using. And so we really got to dive deep into and get into a granular level with those platforms. Now, oftentimes the thing is that we see a lot of buzz online with so many other spaces, but I don't want to overwhelm my teachers with a new thing just because it may offer one new button or something. Sometimes there's duplicity, so that takes place a lot. So it's really just picking what is best, and it all comes down to the relationships. If you as a teacher, as an educator, and myself as an instructional tech, I need to build that relationship with my teachers. Teachers need to build those relationships with their students. The more you speak to them and you build that community and they feel that you are caring for them, you're going to get an idea and a sense of what their learning style is. And then you can offer certain tools that may be applicable that they can just really grasp onto, so you can get an authentic and genuine learning artifact. So those, like I said, I'm coming in a different aspect there, but I think that a lot of those things that we talked about do go in line with what our discussion is. And that is one way that we've been able to leverage our tech tools to keep everybody informed and everybody in the loop of what we're using.
No, 100%. And I love how you're doing the webinars with parents and teaching them the tools and just thinking less is more. So I'm excited to see what Natalie has to say about this, because she's been doing this online for quite some time. And so she really knows the ins and outs of this.
Yeah, it's I have so much empathy for all of you who were thrown online, who had no interest in doing that at all. It was an active choice for me. And so I do totally empathize. And Alfonso and I are like the same brain, apparently, because less is more is like my mantra. And especially, I'm new to Twitter this school year, and man, it's awesome. There are so many ideas out there, but wow, it's like the top 55 things you could use for whatever. And it's overwhelming. So less is more, depth over breadth, all of that. Like, just stick to what works well and what kids are responding to, and then give them a chance to respond to it, give them a chance to get used to it, and really know what your goal is. So there is no one tool that's going to work perfectly for me and then also perfectly for you. So if Flipgrid is your deal and Screencastify is mine, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. You have to think with the end in mind. What is your goal? What's the purpose of this activity? What standard are you assessing? Whatever it might be. Like, do you need Pear Deck for this lesson? Do you need Nearpod? Well, maybe, yeah, you absolutely do, or maybe no. So I'm really into backward design and backward planning and universal design for learning, which is making sure everything's accessible to all kids and that there's multiple ways for them to engage with something. So if you're personalizing learning with tools that are allowing for multiple means of engagement or multiple means of expression, so that means like, a kid could submit a video and that would count, or they could type something up and that would count, or they could physically make something and take a picture of it and that would count for you. If they can express their learning in multiple ways, then you're doing it well and you're doing it right. Can a kiddo show you their thinking, and is the technology making it so that they have a lot of choice and agency in that? Then you're leveraging tools for the betterment of kids' education. Then you're doing a good job with that. So I think one of the things I hope people take away from this year is that there is no one tool or there is no one program, or it isn't like tons of tech is so cool and really fun, of course, but it's like, is it doing for you what you really need it to? Is it enhancing that learning? Is it getting kids deeper into what you want to explore?
I like how you ended there, just like focusing on learning and enhancing learning, amplifying learning. And I really think that when we talk about our next question is thinking about student choice and these EdTech tools that we have now, how can that amplify learning in this type of realm? So the question is, how do you incorporate student choice and agency in your classroom using EdTech? And we'll start with Alfonso, and then we'll have Gordon finish us off with that question.
Well, it's like pretty much it's what Natalie said. That's my answer, because it kind of goes with that, honestly. I mean, with teaching our teachers the tech and myself and getting them ready for those future of work skills. I know a lot of people, the buzzword is learning loss, but look at the learning that has been taking place. I see my teachers thriving. Teachers a year ago that were so scared of using technology are doing phenomenal things with technology. Students, are engaging in a different way, like Natalie was saying. But one of the things is as well, and we can always come back to this, and I'm a big proponent and I'm a big believer that if you build your community and you build your that safe space for your students, getting to know them, you're going to know exactly how to assess them. And like Natalie said, I echo her, where what may work for one person may not work for another. Finding different ways of them giving you or submitting an assignment. We have so many tools that teachers are using, and why not submit something, whether it's a video, you can do a Google slide, you can do a Flipgrid answer, and so on and so forth. So I would always choose, what does the student feel comfortable with? Am I going to see their thought process? Am I going to see them open up? And really what I want to see is I want to see a genuine, authentic learning artifact, whether it's through video, whether it's through voice, because we can give them a digital worksheet, kind of like in the class, you just give them a handout and that's it, or do like a multiple choice test. But now we have the ability to really amplify student voice, and as a teacher, not be scared to move aside and see the students really grasp to a tool or hold on to a tool and really give you a genuine answer, where you might even be surprised as to seeing their thought process. And to me, that is what education is about, seeing the way your students are thinking, which may also cause you to say, well, maybe I need to kind of change my teaching style a bit if maybe I'm not conveying the message correctly, but you're seeing something that is authentic, something that is genuine. And like where we're going back, like Matt was talking about portfolios, you have those artifacts that you have that you can go ahead and share with administrators, you can share with parents, or things that could be so good that they could even be shared as far as a college entrance exam or college admittance, for scholarships and things of that sort. So right now is a great time to amplify that student voice, that student creativity, And I'll just end with this. I know with my master's program, everything was a learning artifact. They just gave us a problem and they said, figure it out. You can use whatever tool you want, but you're just going to submit what is in this rubric. And whether it's a video, whether it's audio, whether it's a presentation, whether it's so on, they gave us choice. And that was scary for me as an adult because I was trained up in elementary to say it's either going to be A, B, C, D, or E, and I have to take a final exam in order to get my master's degree. They're like, no, there's no exam. Your portfolio at the end is your exam with all of your learning artifacts that you've done for all your classes. And once you submit that and we review it and it is to our liking or it meets our rubric criteria, that's it. And that's where it dawned on me at the age of 37, learning what actual choice is. And now we really need to do that also for our students.
Yeah, choice. I mean, regardless of whether the students in kindergarten or all the way up into grad school, I think that choice with a little bit of, push and scaffolding here and there can really help just unleash the creativity and learning. So I'm excited to see what Gordon has to say about what he's doing with student choice.
I really have to echo the previous two speakers. I think one of the overarching mantras we've had in our school over the last several months is this newfound flexibility on thinking about how do we assess learning? What is the product to show learning? How can students submit those products? And I find that super exciting, right? Because almost every day I'm confronted with a new way of how can I be flexible to help support students and what can they do to show me that they have learned? And it was interesting as I was prepping for this, I was doing some reflecting back on like my early days as a teacher and what those old definitions of student choice used to mean. I remember when my first professional coach and mentor, our early goal was just to give them multiple project options as a way to show learning, right? So ultimately, if it was a writing assessment, they were still writing, but the writing product may have been different. If it was a test or a quiz, are you factoring in multiple choice versus short answer? Is it an essay? And that in my early career constituted choice. And now in the last year or so, we've had to really revolutionize that term of student choice. For me in like my English classroom, I've been able to provide a much wider range of text options that align with whatever theme, topic, or concept we're learning about in a given unit. Now, I'm no longer beholden to whatever textbook we were being asked to use or whatever classroom novel we were being asked to use. The opportunity to find alternative versions of text to kind of provide students with varying reading abilities, different access points to text has been transformative for my instructional practice. And from an agency perspective, here in New York City, our big push has been around culturally responsive education and trying to find ways to integrate our students' lived experiences into their classroom experiences. Is what we are teaching reflective of what our students have lived, their cultural backgrounds, their socioeconomic backgrounds, and this virtual space and all these different tech tools that we've been talking about tonight have been a boon to helping all of us do that. Just for an example, I teach the both AP English classes at my school. And what I have found through this culturally responsive lens is there's a much wider range of strong, powerful female authors out there than I had previously known about. I teach at an all-girls school, by the way. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier, but all of the text and all of the literature that we read in both AP classes come from female authors, so that my students then have a connecting point to the text that we are reading. I've been able to kind of expand the cultural scope of the books that we read in class as well. Another piece of this, with all of the different things that have been going on in the world in the last 18 months, really also thinking and teaching critically has become much more powerful with all of these tech tools, because now students are able to start to think about what's going on in the world, thinking about the different levers of power that factor into some of these things that are happening in the world, and thinking about how these events impact different groups of people differently. Now, from a Edtech perspective, I know in different departments around our building, we've been giving student choice, specifically in our math department. Our teachers have been doing kind of traditional lessons virtually, but also offering students the opportunity to complete assignments on Edpuzzle, where they're able to access the teacher's voice. And if they need less support, kind of doing some self-reflection there, they can access assignments on Delta Math as well. And we've recently just got back into the building. I don't know if you've been following the New York City schools reopening and closing, but high schools have been open again for 2 weeks. Our math teachers have started to allow students to practice their math problems on the windows so that they're still able to do some kinesthetic learning, get out of the seats while still being socially distanced, and then you can still just spray them down afterwards. So just to kind of summarize, like just being creative, being flexible with our creativity so that our students have choice. And through that choice, it ends up creating more agency because our students are more invested and more involved with their learning and the work and the learning we're asking them to do.
I really like how you ended with that flexible creativity. That's just, I think, really is a theme of a lot of our answers tonight. So we do have some time left, and I just wanted to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. So you have an opportunity to either raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can say your question, or you can write your question in the chat and I will ask the panelists to answer your question. So either way, and we would love to answer any of the questions that you have. And if there's no questions, we can move in the next minute or so to let each panelist give their lasting words, about 30 seconds to a minute, and about this topic of amplifying learning for a diverse set of learners. So I'll give the audience about 30 more seconds if they have any questions, and then if they don't, we'll go into our overall summaries for this evening.
This is the best part of wait time online, by the way, is the super uncomfortable sitting.
All righty. Well, if I don't see any questions coming into the chat or anyone raising their hand, we'll have everyone provide their last summary. So we'll begin with Janet, then we'll go with Gordon, then we'll go with Alfonso, and then we'll go with Natalie.
So I truly appreciated that silent part because it reminds me of daily life. And Matt, you handled that really well. I think for me, the lesson has been flexibility and growth. And I don't see this as learning loss. I see this as a time of learning gains for our students, for ourselves as a society in so many different ways. And so going back into the classroom, I see my plea to everyone is to continue the growth, continue the use, and continue to really question what we're teaching, why we're teaching, and how we know we've learned it. And I think if we can keep simplifying and really focusing and using tech as the creation tool it should be to create and not consume, that's where I think we need to go next.
I really like the mantra of create, don't consume. Because I know at the beginning of the current academic year, we switched over to a new learning platform. And I had felt initially I had just really gotten the hang of Google Classroom, and New York City had then implemented this iLearn system. And I just remember this overwhelming sense of dread and anxiety having to learn this. And My principal had provided multiple rounds of professional development to learn this, and I was just crippled at the start of the school year with how to, as the teacher, learn how to use this technology. And sometimes I feel like as in teachers, especially in platforms like this, we hear about all of this great tech, all of these great tools, and we immediately want to run back and throw them at our students. And I think that's where the consume part comes in. And I know for me, also serving as a professional coach, I also tend to throw a lot of resources at my colleagues, and sometimes that can be overwhelming for them. And so I think drawing on this idea of flexibility, also understanding, and knowing that understanding is the goal, and that works for us as the teachers as well as with the students. So thank you all for joining. It was great to be here.
All right. Well, thank you again, Matt. Thank you so much. Priya, thank you so much for the invite and getting to meet all these wonderful panelists. I just wanted to say, you know, one of the things that has always helped me from the beginning of my career, I did not go to school to be an educator. I fell into education and I fell in love immediately with everything. I was like in my zone. I vowed I would never be a teacher and I fell into it. And one of the things that has always helped me from the beginning and even until now, and this is what I always share with with all my educator friends and all my teachers in our district and even parents, especially during this time, is just to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Improvise, you know, situations are going to happen. The tech is not always going to work. And that's the thing. I always tell teachers, you know, tech will fail, but you are the teacher, you are the resource, you are flexible. You can go ahead and switch modes from one thing to another. So don't fear that. Don't feel that you are a failure. Just have that growth mindset of just simply doing things a different way, because there's always more than one way. Don't depend on the tech that heavily. And just like Janet said, to use it as that tool for creativity and not just consumption. And also, I just, you know, continue to just have that growth mindset. Don't be closed off to a lot of the things that are happening. Just having that growth mindset. Are we going to fail? Yes, there we are going to fall on our faces sometimes, but always take it that opportunity as a learning opportunity and see how you can grow from there. And always keep in mind that some of your greatest resources you may have in that building with you, which are going to be your other colleagues and even your students. Don't be afraid to ask your students for help or just say, hey, I like what you did there. Can you show the class really when it's for you? Because that's what my practice was. When I was in the classroom and I would start off first block, by the end of the day, I looked like an expert, but I would be asking students, hey, how did you do that? Hey, how did you do that? So by the time at the end of the day, I had those skills in my teacher tool belt to be able to share with others and as that learning continues. So again, I just want to encourage you that, you know, just continue moving forward. Will it be difficult? Yes. I'm like, I can't tell you that we're going to have a fix for this immediately, but just keep doing what you're doing. And I believe in you. So I just want to leave you with that.
I love that, Alfonso. I end my podcast every episode saying, we got this, or you got this. And it's so true because we do. We have this. It's still kids and it's still teachers and it's still parents. It's the basic elements are all still the same. And just to echo what others have said before, you know, less is more. It's okay. You don't have to do all the things. Think back to your brick and mortar days. I don't know if you remember when like the first teacher got the interactive whiteboard, you know, and it was like, woo. And then all of a sudden, you know, an expo marker was so outdated. Well, you know, there are going to be so many tools. Be choosy. Be really choosy and stick with just a few and do what works for your kids. So that's my advice, my final words.
Thank you so much to this amazing panel. Just learned so much just from listening to all these experts in the field, just talking about how they're differentiating, creating creative routes for students, using the tools to amplify learning, just so many great examples. And I just think that where I'm going to summarize my thoughts is just think less is more. you can do so many things with so many great strategies with only just a few tools in your toolkit. And you don't have to be great at 10 to 15 tools. You can be great at like 3 to 4 and have 10 to 15 strategies for those tools, and you're going to be just fine for your students. You're going to be able to empower your students. And also, if you're in the position of teaching other teachers, you'll be in the position to empower them as well. Because if you think about it is, and think less is more, it's going to give them the confidence to do well. And I think that confidence is what's needed during this time as we are continuing to be resilient and adaptive. I would just like to thank Paper for these panels. These panels are derived from the themes of my upcoming book, Navigating the Toggle Term, a guide for K-12 classroom and school leaders, coming out in June. Just really builds upon this, and I'm just so excited and blessed for this opportunity, and I'm going to hand it back over to Paper.
Thank you so much, Matt, Alfonso, Gordon, Janet, Natalie. I mean, this was such an incredible discussion and so many wonderful insights and tools and tips. And hopefully everybody in the audience was furiously writing notes and taking away things. But don't worry, we do provide a recording and a recap of the discussion. So we will make that available over the next couple of days. I know, right, Natalie? You didn't have to write furiously. I probably should have said that up front. This is the last of the series. This is a 3-part series for us, brought to you sort of by teachers around the nation, sharing tips. We do have the recordings and the recaps of all of the sessions. So, keep an eye out on the landing page that I just shared in the chat. That's where you can find the other 2 are there already, and we'll add this one in the coming days. We have launched a new series really talking about scaling one-to-one experiences for students. It's more of a conversation with, some of the district administrators about the cost and the tech and the equity implications of one-to-one. So if you are interested in that, in any of those topics, I'm going to post another website page in the chat right now, just so that you can take a look at the topics and speakers. And obviously, please feel free to join us for that. Thank you again so much for such an incredible conversation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, everyone.